My injury, I had a subdermal hematoma that we now know. Basically, my brain was bleeding in my skull for an unknown reason, and it went misdiagnosed, and I started having some bizarre behavior for about a 2 to 3 month period until I finally had one major rupture in my head where the blood sort of splashed out. I don't know how else to say it. And that either caused me to fall down and strike my head really hard, or I fell down and hit my head really hard that ruptured the already slight bleeding and turned it a lot bigger. Either way, my brain was bleeding in my skull, and that's what we know. And I was thrust into the world of brain injury, and I went through a lot of frustrations trying to go back to work. The lack of resources that were out there and things like this were very frustrating. And that's what started this off, was actually not even necessarily me. I went to my local brain injury association, and there were people there that were much more physically and mentally disabled than I was, that their families needed the brain injury associations to be able to put them there so they could go to work. And it closed down due to lack of funding. And I went home one day after being there and realizing it had closed, and I was going there to bitch about how bad things were for me and try to help get over my depression. Well, why me? Life's so hard. And it hit me that where did they go? What was out there for them? And there's nothing. They're either going to wind up in prison, homeless, or in a care facility. And these were people that if you saw their eyes, they were with it. They were completely there. And that just, that resonated with me in a very real way. And I just thought that how can I feel sorry for myself when I did maintain my wife, I have maintained my home, I still have so much to be grateful for when so many people don't. And that's what started this whole ball rolling. Now I'm running across the country. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're bringing a great message with you, which is wear a helmet.
Yeah, most brain injuries, the vast percentage of them are preventable. Mine was a little bit unique. It's similar to a stroke or an aneurysm or something like that. A lot of those aren't preventable. They're acquired brain injuries. Most brain injuries are preventable. If you look at statistically, most of them come down to, unfortunately, youth doing jackass kind of stunts. Or they're out on their bike, or they're out on their skateboard, or they're in their rollerblade park or the skateboard park, and they simply have a slip and fall and they whack their head. And it changes your life in an instant, and you're a brand new you that doesn't fit into the old world that you've created. And it's devastating, not only to you but to the family. My biggest motivator is also watching my wife get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and work 3 jobs and come home at 11 at night to maintain the mortgage. As a male, not that I need to be the provider, that's a very hard thing to watch. The person that I love works so hard just to maintain a certain quality of life, and that's just to make our mortgage and our utility payments, and that kills me every day to watch her come home. So yeah.
You also talk about you're very grateful for the healthcare system in Canada. When you reflect on that, do you think that you would be in the position that you were had you not been in Canada?
Oh no, well, number one, if I was in another country that didn't have our medical system, if it was in somewhere that we don't have the free medical that we do, I would be in debt several $1 millions. I literally had brain surgery and over a month of care along with more than a year of rehabilitation. That would have bankrupted me, that would have bankrupted my family. I couldn't have afforded at my time medical care. I made $30,000 a year as a single guy, and it just wouldn't have happened. I would have definitely been homeless and bankrupt and declaring bankruptcy, let alone to live in a country that just doesn't have the medical standards that we do in another country. And that's another thing when you think outside of Canada. What does somebody in a less developed country do when they whack their head? And how many of these people are out there that don't even know, or in a society that doesn't understand what they are, get the help that they needed, right? So incredibly grateful that I live in this fantastic country and we do have the medical care that we have. Doesn't mean it's perfect. There's a great disconnect between they put a cast on the wound and then they sent me home to very small care afterwards. And I think that's where the shortcoming falls, and that's where the support's needed. Yeah.
And that's what you're raising funds for.
We're raising funds. Once I was sent home as a new person, I fell through the cracks of social service. The social service worker that was to see me out was on mat leave, and there was no one there to replace her. I was then forced to go through things like going to the welfare office, as it's known, and get in line with all the other people that collect welfare, to an overworked, underpaid staff member who's facing cutbacks, who for 8 hours a day has to deal with people that abuse the system, who are mentally, physically disabled, that are dealing with complex issues, racial issues, all the rest, and they lose their temper sometimes, and I thought that was a disconnect, and I felt that that needed, it wasn't my fault, and I'm really sorry to make you do your job, but, you know, please don't get mad at me, you know, and that's how it came across sometimes, and I understand their point of view, that they are undertrained, understaffed, overworked, and they need resources as well. And it's just one of the things that we need to look at for changing. You know, we have a fantastic country, but I find a lot of the times we're painting the outside of the house when we need to sort of fix the broken foundation. You know, and that's sort of the way that I feel a lot of things get fixed. So.